be discussing this poem Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda, and in this part we'll be discussing something about the author and then we'll discuss the poem in length. Now let us start. Pablo Neruda won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1971. He became a poet when he was 13 years old and wrote in a variety of styles. Pablo Neruda is one of the most influential and widely read 20th century poets of the Americas. His famous works include 20 love poems and a song of despair. Now we'll move on to the para-wise discussion of this poem. The first paragraph is, now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still. For once on the face of earth, let's not speak any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. Now, the theme of the poem is basically based on the idiom that silence is golden. You know, when people are in the present era, people are engaged in so much activity. You know, they have work, they have families, they have to be socially active, and for once, if we do not pay attention to all these things, if we do not pay attention to being active so much, you know, and we stop for 1 second and be quiet. So this poem is all about being quiet, being silent, and finding moments of peace from this chaotic life, from this life full of work and full of activity. So this is the basic theme of the poem, that how peace, silence, and brotherhood can be the solutions for war and all the problems that the mankind is facing today. Now the first paragraph that I just read, it talks about how the poet is inviting us to count till 12. You know, he's saying that count to 12, now we'll count to 12 and we will all keep still. Now this word 12 is symbolic of many things. 12 may mean the number of hours in a day, the number of hours of daylight. जब तक दिन रहता है 12 घंटे, ये उन 12 घंटों की भी एक सिंबल प्रेजेंट की है पोएट ने. Basically he's saying that we should stay quiet, we should stay silent for all of our days, or for all of the 12 years, all of the 12 months that we have in a year. So basically all the time, all the important time that we are wasting in being so active, engaging in everything we can, instead we should use this time to be quiet and introspect, talk with ourselves, give attention to our feelings. And he's saying that for once on the face of earth, let's not speak in any language. This is also a very nice line. This is one of the most favorite lines of mine in this poem. In these lines, the poet is basically conveying the message that we as human beings, we are living on this earth. We owe so much to our mother earth, and for once, we should not speak in any language. We should not do any harm to our mother earth. We should be still. We should not be doing anything, and we should be peaceful. We should not speak in any language, and we should not argue so much. We as human beings, we have learned to speak so much. We have learned to express ourselves so beautifully that we go on and on and on, and we never stop. So this is the message that the poet is giving, that for once, be quiet and not speak in any language. Now this last line, which says, not move our arms so much. Now this not move our arms so much, it has two meanings. The word arms has two meanings. Author is saying, do not move your arms. Arms can be your physical arms, you know, the arms which you use in violence. And the second meaning this arms has, the ammunition, the various guns, tanks, and various ammunition, various arms that you use to create war. The big countries that use these ammunition to create war, they should not move them so much. They should not create a situation where they have to take out their ammunition and go to a war with the country. So this is what the poet, this is, there is so much of information that poet has conveyed in each and every paragraph. So this is the crux of the first paragraph that we have gone through. Next paragraph says that it would be an exotic moment, without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. In this paragraph, the poet is explaining the beauty of being silent, what it will be worth if you remain silent. He says that it would be an exotic moment. Exotic is basically special. Special, exotic. If you call something exotic, that thing is not found easily. That is something special. So the poet says that it would be an exotic moment. It would be a special moment if that moment does not have any rush, any activity, and any engines. Engines are basically all the development that the author is talking about. If there is not so much chaos, if there is not so much traffic, not the use of mobile phones, not the use of cars, everything, every development that has taken place in the modern era, if that is stopped for a second, suddenly if that is stopped for a second, it would be an exotic moment. And in the absence of these developments, in the absence of usage of all the facilities that we're given today, we would all be together. We would all sit together, we would all talk about each other's feelings, and we will get to know each other better. And we would be together in a sudden strangeness. It would be a sudden strangeness because after all this time, we have been busy in our lives so much that we do not get to take time for our beloved ones. So this would be strange for all of us because we would get to know them more. We would get to sit with them and we would get to talk with them. This is basically pointing towards all the countries that are going at war, that have basically cold differences in their talks. The poet is also pointing to them that you should sit together, you should you know take out all the differences, keep all the differences aside, keep all the ego aside, and come together, and you will feel what a strange feeling it is to be together, sit together and talk peacefully. This is also pointing to that situation. Next paragraph is, fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would not look at his hurt hands. There are a number of devices which which the poet has used in all of these paragraphs, and these devices will be discussed by me in the coming part. But for now, we will discuss this paragraph, which has so many symbols in it. The first symbol is fishermen in the cold sea. Fishermen in the cold sea and man gathering salt. These are the two symbols which we are dealing in this paragraph. The fishermen in the cold sea. The fishermen are in the cold sea, and the men gathering salt. They are basically they are basically the symbols of modern man. Modern man is setting up industries, is exploiting natural resources, is exploiting natural habitat of various animals just for the sake of development. These are the two symbols of the modern men, the fishermen in the cold sea and the men gathering salt. The poet is saying that, now basically this paragraph is also a continuation of the previous paragraph where we were talking about an exotic moment, a special moment. The author is saying that if we would stop the fishermen in the cold sea, the man making so much use, the man who is exploiting so much of natural resources, he would not harm the whales. He would look at his hurt hands. The whales are basically symbol of all the animals which have to leave their natural habitats because of the development that the man is taking place. We're talking about all the developments taking place in this era which have harmed the Mother Earth. They would stop for a second if we stop all of the exploitation and sit together. So this is what the author is talking about in this paragraph, that the men would stop and they would look at their hurt hands. They would look how much destruction they have caused with these hands. They would sit down and look at their hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in shade doing nothing. Now, in these initial lines, where the author is talking about various wars, they are the various wars which countries go through, right? Green wars, wars on the basis of natural resources, just as two countries fight over the flow of river, and the wars with gas, the wars with fire, the various types of wars various countries go through. Wars including arms and ammunition, wars including Cold War, where no arms are used, but the countries are at Cold War with each other. They do not talk with each other and they do not engage with each other. So this is a war. These are various types of wars which are which the poet is talking about. So all of these wars would stop. All of these wars which have no survivors. All of these wars, they create so much destruction, and no one is alive to see this. No one is alive to see who has won. Now, victories with no survivors. This is basically the line which conveys a beautiful message that says that all the countries which go on wars, go on various types of wars, whether a cold war or a war including arms and ammunition, they are of no use, because ultimately such a high level of destruction is caused that no one is left to see the state of the country who has won. So what is the use of the victory when no one is alive to celebrate it? All of these wars would stop if we would just settle down for a second and introspect and talk with ourselves. So this victory with no survivors would put on clean clothes. Now the poet is going on to say that those who prepare various types of wars, those who prepare for wars, victories with no survivors, they would put on clean clothes. Clean clothes are basically an example of a clean state of mind, a clean thought process. All those who prepare for various wars, they would have a clean mindset if they would settle for a second. And also, they would walk about with their brothers in shade. Shade is basically an example of peace. The poet is saying that the people who prepare for wars, first of all, they would adopt a clean mindset, a mindset full of peace and love. And secondly, they would walk about with their brothers, they would walk about with their human companions in the world of peace, doing nothing. No talking, no war, and no rebellion. Nothing would be taking place, and they would be walking about in peace. If we would just stop for a second. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. This is also an important paragraph and the concluding paragraph, which gives a beautiful ending to the poem, where the author says that what I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Now the poet is expressing the misunderstanding that may have been created in the previous paragraphs. He says that the poet basically ये कह रहा है कि मैं आप लोगों को रुकने के लिए नहीं कह रहा हूँ. I am not saying that you should totally stop. What I am saying is just introspect for a moment. Just talk with yourself, be at peace. Sometimes find a moment or two where you can gather all your thoughts and make yourself at peace. You should not totally stop, because when you stop totally, this is a situation which ultimately means death. Life is all about moving. Life is all about growing. This is not what the author is talking about, that you should totally stop. Author is suggesting taking a moment or two to relax yourself and calm yourself. He is saying so because he wants no truck with death. Death is a subject which no one wants to go into, which no one wants to deal with. So this is the same situation with the poet, where he says that I do not want you to be totally inactive, because being totally inactive means being dead, and do not want to go into the subject of death. This is what the poet is conveying. He's clearing the misunderstanding that might have been created in the previous paragraphs. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Now the author is saying that, the poet is saying, if we were not so single-minded, अगर हम ऐसे ही सिंगल माइंडेडली, ऐसे ही सेल्फिश होकर अपनी लाइफ को ऐसी अगर चलने ना देते, और अगर हम कुछ देर रुक कर, if we would stop for some time, perhaps a huge silence would come in between the sadness. Let me explain it in simple words. That is, if we were not so single-minded, if we would not care about money, care about wealth so much, if we were not moving, if we would stop for a second, so this period of sadness where we were always moving, it would be interrupted by a huge silence which would make us believe that what wrong we were doing, why we were never understanding ourselves, and why we were always threatening ourselves with death. People always move towards good health, making more money, making more wealth, but they never understand that basically they are moving themselves away from death. They are not understanding themselves and the basic concept of human life. A human is immortal. He has to die sometime. This body has to decay. Human life goes on and on, not understanding this principle. We always run away from this principle and we never understand ourselves. If we would stop for a second and understand this principle, we would be so much happy and we would not be so single-minded. This is a beautiful, deep message which this paragraph is giving. That let's stop for a second and not threaten ourselves with death, which is the basic principle of human life. Perhaps the earth can teach us, as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now I'll count up to 12 and you keep quiet and I will go. This is the last paragraph where the author is leaving us from where he started. He started the poem by counting till 12, and now he's also leaving the poem by counting till 12. In this last paragraph, the author is telling us to take inspiration from earth. He's telling what we can learn from earth. Earth can teach us a principle that when everything seems to be dead, it can later prove to be alive. This can be illustrated from an example. When we see plants, when we see all the living things, forests, animals, they do not grow all together. They grow gradually. Basically, take only plants. When plants grow, they grow gradually. They are, for the most of their life, they are stationary. They do not move from one point to another. And something which does not move from one point to another, it seems to be dead. Being motionless is a sign of being dead. So all the things that nature has created, they seem to be dead. But when they grow, but when they prosper, and the small plants, they grow into big trees, then we come to know that actually this plant was alive. This is a beautiful principle that the earth teaches us, that when even one thing that seems to be dead, it grows on to be alive. From this line, author is teaching us that when everything seems to be dead, even if you are motionless, even if you seem to be dead, this time of being motionless can be used by you to come out alive, to come out with better thoughts, come out with a clean mind state, and with all the qualities of peace and brotherhood in you. You would not be dead because you're motionless, but you would come out of this motionless state with more of qualities that you were not having before. And now the author concludes the poem by saying that now I will count up to 12, you keep quiet, and I will go. He's also leaving us on a satisfactory note where he says that I'll keep counting up to 12 and you keep quiet and I'll leave. That's all for the day. Thank you and have a nice day.